Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, conversations with interesting members of the Hamilton College community. This week's guest is Michael Breslin, class of 2013. All right, welcome back for another one. Last week we heard from Gabe Malika and talked about his podcast, 35 Minutes with Gabe Malika. Well, if you did your homework and went back and listened to Gabe's podcast, you know that this week's guest, Michael Breslin, was Gabe's first guest on that show. So it's all intertwined now. I was very excited to talk with Michael because for the last year, it seemed like every few months, Michael was getting another headline for some wild success. Maybe you saw some of those headlines. There was the play he co-wrote, Circle Jerk, which was a Pulitzer finalist in drama. Or you may have seen when he and his creative partner, Patrick Foley, were selected to executive produce and write the book for Ratatouille, the Tik Tok Musical, which raised $2 million for the Actors Fund. Or his latest work, again with his creative partner, Patrick Foley, and their theater group, Fake Friends, This American Wife, which is a must-see for Real Housewives fans. It really feels like getting an opportunity to talk to someone who's, I think, really writing the next chapter of theater, setting the course for what the future of Broadway is going to look like. So it was a treat to hear how it all started. So enjoy this one. Here is Michael Breslin, class of 2013. Okay.
Hello.
Oh my God. I can hear you. I can see you. This is
Amazing.
A miracle. This is a miracle. Well, we've already established right off the bat that you have the patience of a saint. So thank you very much.
You know, I'm in theater, so we're really used to just sitting around and waiting for the technology to work. It's like part of our job.
While some other schmuck like me is sweating his ass off trying to make it happen.
Exactly.
Well,
to meet you.
I was just trying to make you feel at home. That's all.
It worked.
Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I've been seeing you on Instagram. It's very exciting that you're doing this.
You know, as I was trying to put something together, I knew that nobody wanted to listen to me play Billy Joel for an hour, and that wouldn't necessarily be interesting. So I thought, well, maybe I can talk to some interesting people from Hamilton. And it turns out there's actually a lot of interesting people, yourself very much included. Yeah,
it's the best kept secret, I think, Hamilton College. You know, it produces really some stunning people, and not just in terms of career, you know, in terms of everything. But not a lot of people know about it, at least in my field. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think that was one of the interesting things I wanted to explore. And I'm learning that more and more as I start to do this. I'm about a year in, and more names keep surfacing and more people keep doing interesting things. More people get, you know, on the cover of the New York Times arts section and or nominated for Pulitzer finalist and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome.
And speaking of which, you are having quite the year.
Yes, it has been a very busy and productive year.
Are you exhausted?
I am, actually. I took the whole month of June off, and then I said that to someone earlier today, and they were like, well, it's mid-July. And I was like, oh. I was like, I guess I took a month and a half off. Like, I just started reading again, like yesterday, or I guess a few days ago.
So you took everything off.
I took everything off. I really did. I was like, because really starting last, basically July in prep for the October run of Circle Jerk, it's been nonstop. And it's sort of a little bit of everything. It's like the writing, the producing, and the performing. And then the most recent piece that we did was the biggest and most taxing in terms of performance. So I was ready for a break.
Good for you. And do you feel energized now? Do you feel rested?
You know, I'm getting there. I feel like I'm having that moment of like this. It was really like such a huge whirlwind. Obviously personally, like the past 18 months, but also like, globally and nationally. It was like just such a really intense period. I know that we're not totally out of it in terms of the pandemic, but even, I mean, the election feels like years ago now. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
the uprising on January 6th feels like, decades ago. It just feels so much has happened. So I'm starting to feel more creative again.
Could you appreciate all of the whirlwind of craziness and success that you had, given all that other shit that's going on? And that's not to say like, oh, you shouldn't have, but everyone lived through such craziness that it felt like nothing was real world. To layer on top of that the crazy run you've had, your head must be spinning.
One of the reasons so I run a theater company called Fake Friends, and we had been developing our first piece, which is called Circle Jerk, and was the Pulitzer finalist piece, and really was the first thing that put us on the map over the past year. But something that was happening to us was like sort of starting in March 2020, we started to see like elements of our show happening in culture. So we were really obsessed with TikTok starting basically early summer 2019. And then right at the top of the pandemic, TikTok obviously really took off and started being everywhere. And half of Circle Jerk is basically TikToks. And we were like, oh, that's weird. And then we had this whole, a bunch of the plot is about disinformation and misinformation. And there was a lot of that obviously going on at the start of the pandemic and obviously leading up to the presidential election. There was just a lot of stuff. And we were like, we sort of have to go now, and we have to figure out how to go now to get this piece out into the world. So sort of having the piece happening concurrently with what was going on in America felt very right. Actually, it felt sort of necessary for us from an artistic perspective. So that was interesting. But then it's been very strange being divorced from people like in the flesh. So like just over the past month or so, I've been out and people have been like, oh my God, I love Circle Jerk. And I'll be like, wait, like a human with a body watched it? Like I thought it was just like a bunch of like Russian bots or something.
That's interesting. And that coupled with, I think, basically the three in a row that you've had, that Ratatouille and This American Wife, all seem to have played extremely well for the environment we're in, i.e. virtual. None of them feel like you took a stage show and adapted it and made the best you could. In fact, all three seem to live natively in that environment. Was that intentional, or just you knew what you had, the medium you had to work with, and you designed for that? Because it seems like the new world of theater is this hybrid of in person and not, and you all seem to be kind of leading the charge. Was that intentional?
It was by no means intentional. I think I was saying earlier this week, like around last July, we were in pre-production for Circle Jerk, and I was in a very naive but really motivated, like energized place. Like it was very naive to think that we could pull off a 13 camera, live called broadcasts, like in the middle of a pandemic to the internet. Like that was just like a really insane mindset to be in. And the ideas were happening so quickly and it just felt like there was a lot of adrenaline. But Circle Jerk in content also deals with questions of internet virality, of memes, of disinformation online, of course, also with gay Twitter and, sort of white gay identity from everywhere from Twitter to Reddit to 4chan. So it was a very natural translation or adaptation from the stage onto the screen, and it hadn't premiered on stage yet. It was still in development. Mm-hmm. So that felt really natural, and it was actually productive and helped the show, the translation from in-person to digital. Ratatouille was like from beginning, middle, end was that like
that was purely
that was pure TikTok, and I was really more of like an editor and producer on that project more than anything else. And then This American Wife we had done in at New York Theater Workshop in Manhattan in 2018. So that was more of an adaptation process into the digital world. But of course, it was dealing with television, which now basically exists on the internet as well. So it was a nice confluence of things.
There seems like your keen sense of media and keen sense of the time in which the media gets consumed, i.e. today, coupled with what seems like an enjoyment of playing with expectations in a lot of the work. And even TikTok, right? And maybe that's what drew you to TikTok, is most of the good TikTok videos play with people's expectations and surprises and twists. Talk about that a little bit. I see you nodding, so I'm on to something.
Yeah, totally. I grew up addicted to message boards, to instant messenger, to, all those early social media sort of things. Like I had dial-up internet in my parents' house in New Jersey from the time I was like 10 or something, maybe probably even younger. So I really educated myself sort of in real time in my development. So the media and the technology is just a part of how I see the world. It's not a tool that I take on in order to make some sort of point. It really is embedded in my day-to-day life and has been since I was very young. So that's always been very interesting to me as an artist. And then I am very interested in comedy. And I think one of the best, most productive functions of comedy is to play with the viewer's expectation and what they think is going to happen versus what does. And of course, comedy can exist at the level of jokes, but it also can exist at the level of, dramatic structure or form. So we spend a lot of time in Fake Friends talking about, subversion of expectation as not just like a pleasurable thing for an audience member to experience, but also in many ways a sort of political statement that does come from a queer standpoint. So that overlap between, TikTok and the queer theater world was very exciting to us.
And it seems like it's not just the queer theater world that is responding. I mean, there seems to be more and more of a mainstream response. I mean, I think when you're playing with Ratatouille, TikTok, and so forth, but even in that, there were you played with expectations on gender and you played with expectations on sexuality and that a bit in some of the characters' choices and so forth. So it's really fascinating stuff to see.
Thank you. Yes, we were very excited about queering Ratatouille. Having a good time.
I want to get into the formation of Fake Friends and the work, but let's go back. It's a show that is loosely based on Hamilton, so let's talk about it. So you mentioned being from New Jersey. How did you go from Jersey to Clinton, New York?
I went to a prep school in New Jersey called Blair Academy, which was close by where I grew up. My father had been sent to Blair in high school because he had behavioral individual behavior. I don't know. He was a troublemaker. So he was sent to Blair. So I went there and I'd always been doing theater my whole life. And Blair had a great theater program. And I wanted to do the whole, NYU route. I was like, I'm going to NYU, whether anyone likes it or not. I was so intent on going to NYU for like acting or musical theater, some sort of whatever I could do. I was like, I'm going. Then I didn't get in. And it was like the worst day of my life. I had like a complete meltdown. And my mom was like, she was like, well, maybe now you can consider like a real school or like not in a condescending way to people who go to NYU, because Patrick, my writing partner, did actually the program that I wanted to do there. So I think that they can produce immensely talented people. But my mom always knew that I had an interest in reading and writing critically and, that sort of stuff. So very randomly at a college fair, someone was like, oh, you should talk to the people from Hamilton. I, for some reason, liked them. I don't know why, based on like now how I view sort of the school's presentation of itself, but they convinced me that there's like a huge, theater which was basically a lie program. And then I wound up on the wait list at Hamilton, and then got in after I'd graduated from high school.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So I graduated high school basically not knowing where I was going to college. And then I got off the wait list at Hamilton, I think the week or so after.
Wow. That's had to be some tense times.
I was very calm about it. I don't know. It was I really wanted to go to Hamilton. I remember the first time I visited, I was like, this is it. I just sort of knew being there. And I had an amazing tour guide, who you should interview. Her name's Ashlyn Razzo, if you haven't already.
Okay.
She's amazing. She was my tour guide, and then she wound up being a student there while I was there, I think for 2 years. And she was a theater major. And I was like, this just feels like the right place for me. So then I wound up in Clinton, New York in August of 2009.
Okay. And let's go back to Jersey for a second. So as a kid who knew then you wanted to get into theater and wanted to go to NYU, were you taking trips into the city, getting yourself in trouble and going to see shows? And
oh my God, of course. I was. Are you from New York?
I grew up on Long Island, had family up and down New Jersey. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So the train into the city, and then me and my friend from high school were obsessed with Spring Awakening when I was in high school. So I saw that like literally like 14 times on Broadway, and never paid like the full price, but I was always very obsessed with Broadway. And I have to say, I wasn't very aware of really anything happening off Broadway, and certainly not off Broadway. Like I was very immersed in the Broadway sort of fan culture, especially as like a preteen, and in high school, that was really my passion. Whereas at the same time, I was in high school and I was very obsessed with the Shakespeare I was reading in English class, and some, the literature that I was reading. I never really necessarily had an interest or exposure to other types of theater.
And then when you're studying theater, because it's one of the things that I had a conversation with Mark Cryer, and I was relatively unaware of the theater program at Hamilton. I think your chuckle about thinking there was a large theater program probably makes me feel a little bit better that I wasn't wildly aware of the theater program there. But when you're going through that, for the uninformed like me, the assumption is everyone wants to be the big Broadway star and win a Tony and perform. But I imagine you're learning a lot more than that, which comes in handy when you're now running your own company and producing and writing and starring and so forth. It's all the elements of quote unquote theater that I don't think most people are aware of. Is that where you're learning a lot of that, is at Hamilton, or more so when you continued your studies afterwards?
Hamilton's theater department like changed my life completely. Like I got there and everything that I thought I knew, it sounds so cliche, but everything that I thought I knew about theater was sort of very quickly upended. I had Mark Cryer my first semester, who was amazing and a very enthusiastic and talented acting teacher. But at the end of my first year, going into my second, I met Craig Luttrell, who's a professor of theater who is still a mentor in many ways. And actually, so crazy, my first day at Hamilton, as a freshman, my advisor was Carol Bellini Sharp, who recently actually passed away on my birthday 2 years ago. Wow. And she, from that first day, was immediately much more than a teacher to me. She was a spiritual figure sort of in my life. Like she was very transformative. And she taught me, she and Craig and Nancy Rabinowitz in the comp lit department and Peter in the comp lit department, basically taught me from the ground up about the history of, sort of art theater and theater productions that weren't happening on Broadway, that were sort of internationally and happening downtown, and the history of downtown theater and history of queer theater, of Black theater, of feminist theater, of all of these different forms. They really taught me that. So Hamilton's department, in that sense, to answer your question, like was a very intense artistic and intellectual time for me personally. And I think all the skills of running a company, of all that, really came through the extracurriculars at Hamilton, which for me was really a cappella.
Okay. And which group?
I was in Duly Noted with Gabe.
Oh, okay. Yes, I did hear. I heard when I listened to his episode on his podcast with you. You both talked about that. That's right.
It's I think it's the newest one.
Yeah, I don't think it was there when I was there.
Yeah.
There was the Buffers. There was the Hamiltons, which was like the co-ed one, and then there was Special K. So they had been the three of them, and that was it. They didn't have any others. So good for you. And then you came in and started a turf war with the. No, just kidding.
Anything Hamilton related where I'm given the opportunity, I will trash the Buffers as an institution.
Let's hear it.
I think that it is an antiquated, patriarchal, veering on white supremacist organization that needs to be ended immediately, or severely reconfigured.
Because why?
Because one of its history as the comedy troupe, at Hamilton College, at all male Hamilton College. Two, because of the experiences that I had with the group while I was there, I found it to be completely disgusting, and misogynist and homophobic, and gay people could be homophobic too. So I don't, you know what I mean? Like it, and that's all I'll say. I don't want to be that negative. I'm basically, it's sort of a shtick, but I do deeply believe it.
Okay. All right. Interesting. I honestly, I wasn't aware of the history. I mean, I know the history of Hamilton as an all male school, and I imagine any institution that came out of that doesn't have the best history.
It's just like you see those men sort of standing in a row singing that like Hamilton song or whatever, and my gut is like, this can't be good. Like, this can't be good.
There's some history in that for sure. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. And then as you're learning the new, all of this new information, or learning more about your theater mind is being expanded. Clearly, it didn't dissuade you from your childhood dream. Seems to have only intensified it. What was the plan? Like how you locked it in? You said, "This is what I'm going for," and then how does one go about going after it? I guess.
I think I graduated Hamilton, and I was still in the middle of my Hamilton sort of intellectual journey, and Carol and Craig and Nancy were pushing me, and I had a very intense senior project that I did, which was an adaptation of Medea that was at the Old Minor Theater, and that sort of stirred up a lot of questions about directing and adaptation. But I had just been an actor really my whole life. Like I had never really done the more creative team roles. And then I did the Bristol Fellowship after graduating Hamilton. So I basically went right into that for a year abroad through Europe and Brazil and Indonesia. And it was amazing.
What are you picking up along the way when you're visiting those countries and doing your thing? Like, are you taking little bits and pieces of everything and kind of forming?
Yeah, like my project was on like cross-gender performance and different iterations of that in different cultures. But I think more truthfully, at the end of the year, my project was really on like gay bars in different countries. Like, right. To be really honest. But it was the gay bars and experiencing gay and queer culture in different countries. And then of course, all the artistic experiences I had were sort of too much for me to really even understand at the time. I'm sure the tequila didn't help, but it was a very tumultuous year in that respect. But I saw a lot of European theater that I had been dying to see based on Craig and Carol's suggestion. And I spent some time in Indonesia actually with Craig. Like, it was a very intense year. And Carol, again, she was always pushing me, and she would always say sort of like, I don't know where this is heading for you. She was very honest with me. And she was the kind of teacher where we had brunch every Saturday at Charlie's place, in I don't know if it's in Clinton, but we were very close. And she would always say, like, I just don't know where this is headed, and but not in a bad way. And then I came back to New York. I lived in Bushwick, and I sort of started interning with whoever would take me. And actually, through a Hamilton alum, Randy Rivera, I wound up interning with this theater company called Half Straddle, that's run by a writer and director named Tina Satter, who her play was just announced that it's going to Broadway last week. And it's her Broadway debut and all that.
Wow.
So I was sort of in the right crowds. Like, I was doing a lot of observing, and I had no idea that I wanted to, write my own plays. And I had no idea that I wanted to really be in them, really. And then I wound up going to Yale, sort of because I looked at all these different graduate programs, basically programs and what the different courses would be in each year. And I found this program at Yale that was in dramaturgy and dramatic criticism. And I wasn't like, oh, that's like exactly what I want to call myself. But I was like, that is exactly what I want to sort of study right now. And to be really frank, coming from Hamilton, I didn't have a network in the theater world really at all. I had maybe 2 to 3 contacts. And, these people graduating from NYU or even Wesleyan or, these more, or Skidmore, these more theater-y schools, they have a whole group of people to collaborate with and to get them jobs, really, and to bring them into processes. So I was like, I don't have that at all. I was like, and I need to get some sort of network. And I was like, I will go to Yale.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that seems to have worked out for you.
It's really crazy. I was choosing between going to Yale and going to NYU for my master's program, because I got into an MA program in performance studies at NYU. And I still had a little bit of that NYU dream. Sure. And my mother one day was like, Michael, like, you are being so crazy right now. Like, if you get into Yale, like, you go to Yale. So then I just sort of dropped that, identity crisis. And then I wound up going for 3 years.
Okay. In preparing for conversations like this, I'll often do research, and if there are other interviewers or media of people, I will try to seek them out. So I've watched a few things that you've done, and you talk a lot about dramaturgy in your conversations. Oftentimes when I do prep for interviews, I learn things like, in fact, what dramaturgy is. So can you talk a little bit about what that is for those that don't know?
Sure. Depending on who you ask, dramaturgy is either like 2,000 years old or like 100 years old or like 80 years old. But how I think about it and how I approach it is it's the study and practice of the history of theater and performance more generally. Studying, basically, I also sort of say it's like the liberal arts of like professional theater workers. You study history, you study critical writing about theater, you study different theories of performance and of theater and of acting. At Yale, I really got that complete immersion into theory, history, and critical writing in dramaturgy. In production, it can often mean doing a lot of research for the writer or the director or the actors or the designers. It
And
can
that's to help
involve,
understand the context within when a piece was written or what was going on in the time in which the piece is taking place, to help inform any key decisions of the performance or set design or anything like that.
exactly. It can
Got it.
sort of help fill in some of the questions that are left by the play, which, a lot of plays, they don't have to answer all the questions, so sometimes the dramaturg can help with that. But then new play dramaturgs can also read drafts of new plays that haven't been produced yet and sort of be more of an editorial voice in the room too.
Interesting.
So they can be like, this is too long, or this character doesn't make any sense, or you should cut the whole thing, or whatever the notes may be. So yeah, I'm a huge believer in dramaturgy. In Fake Friends, 3 out of the 4 of us have MFAs in dramaturgy. I think it's more about my affinity for history and for the liberal arts than it
with the
is
three
necessarily.
with the 3 and 4 of you as dramaturgs, are you? Does that lead to a lot of arguing and debates? Are there?
Oh my God. It leads to, I feel bad for Patrick, who's the actor in the group. Like, it leads to a lot of intellectual sort of circle jerks, if you will, and sort of, tete-a-tetes. But luckily, this is the thing. I learned this at Hamilton. Often the smartest people are also the hardest partiers. So we also are fun. We're not just nerdy.
Fair enough.
So, yeah.
So, how does Fake Friends come to be?
So I was
You met Patrick at Yale.
I met Patrick at Yale. I met Kat and Ariel at Yale too. I met Patrick in my first year. I met everyone in my first year. But in my first year, I was honestly looking around and looking at the work that people who were writing and directing plays were doing. And of course, I had people who I was like completely stunned by their talents. Like, my roommate was Jeremy O. Harris, who's still a dear friend. And he's, this big Tony nominated playwright now. Like, he's more than a star. He's just like a genius person. There were so many people there who I was really impressed by, but then there were also people who I was like, oh, I can do this like better than you. So I was like, I want to start making my own stuff. And I met Patrick and we connected, in that origin story that we tell in like literally every interview that we do. And we made This American Wife in like a 15-minute sketch version. And then Kat and Ariel worked on that piece actually. And it just sort of clicked. It all sort of worked. We loved working together. Patrick is a very subversive, very dangerous performer. I think he's very scary in many ways, which I love. And he's hilarious.
Scary because you don't know what's gonna come out of him.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's really like, he could still be on SNL, I think, but like he's like a really dark SNL figure, like sort of like old school, you know what I mean? Where it's like something would come on and you'd be like, oh my God, like that was so real and so smart and so fast, but also like now I'm like scared. So yeah, that was really awesome. And then it was very organic. We just kept doing stuff.
And how much of it was just to hell with this, we're going to do our own thing, or out of necessity, or like what I get why that you all came together, common sensibility, the desire to argue over some rare historical text about theater. But there is a hard work, conscious decision that we're going to be in the ones in charge versus going and chasing someone else's project. Is that a creative control sort of issue?
It was instilled in me by Carol actually and Craig in this like, if you want to make work on your own terms, you sort of have to make it happen yourself. And I think in the American theater, and I definitely learned this at Yale, and I think I'm still learning it now in the professional theater. administrators and people in power, producers, are very afraid of change or of like new approaches. So we knew pretty early on at Yale that like there wasn't going to be a ton of support either from the students or from the faculty necessarily, though of course there are certain faculty members that have been like wildly supportive and huge champions of us, but we weren't going to fit into the curriculum as it existed. It's sort of conservative and meant for one sort of theater professional. So we had to do it ourselves. And honestly, it's fun. It's sort of like, it's like running an a cappella group or something in Hamilton. Of course, now it's like on a much bigger scale, but at the time it felt extracurricular, though obviously it wound up being the work that, brought us into the professional sphere.
And then that work births Circle Jerk, This American Wife, and Circle Jerk. Crammed in there is also this Ratatouille thing, which wasn't yours. It was born out of TikTok. How much creative control or when you get brought in, do you need to give up? You're used to doing your own thing and going as wild or as heady as you want to be for something like this. While not a Disney project, it's still Disney adjacent. Are you having to reel yourself back a little bit for something like that?
One of our first questions with the producer was like, what is Disney's interaction with this? And they basically were like, they've given us the go ahead. They know that, Michael and Patrick of Circle Jerk are doing this. And they don't really want any other involvement. So that was a good sign. And then, I sort of knew the audience. Like, I don't love when I watch things that are clearly for a general audience and like the writers or the performers are being deliberately like inappropriate. You know what I mean? Like, I always find it a little like, but if you're an adult and you watch Ratatouille, there are some adult jokes that I think you can only really pick up on if you're like if you actually know what they mean. So we had a lot of fun sort of writing for two different audiences on that. Like, how do we make the kids and the teens sort of like really love it? Though I think teens are quite sophisticated and probably got the adult jokes too. And, so that was it was so different and it was so fast because I was literally sitting on this couch in like the end of November and they were like, we need the script in like a week.
I don't know much, but I know that sounds fast to me.
It was very fast, and yeah.
And then there's also sourcing from what probably were countless TikTok videos, right? I mean, you had to pick the best of the best or what fit into your story. A lot had to get left on the cutting room floor, I imagine.
Yeah, luckily the production company that we worked with, because that actually wasn't a Fake Friends production, it was Seaview, which is a Broadway production company. They had a whole team of researchers basically who cataloged all of the TikToks. So then we were able to go through with Lucy Moss, the director, and with Greg, the producer, and some of the music staff and sort of do it more collectively. But it did suck to have to not include some songs or whatever, because it was such an organic TikTok trend that it felt a little weird to exclude some people from it. But
yeah, in the world of entertainment, anything that has an ounce of success tries to get beaten to death. So have you gotten calls for what's the next TikTok production?
This actually connects to what I was saying before about the fear of the producers. No. Which is
okay.
Of course, like we have actually we're overbooked with projects basically through collaborators we already had through Fourth Wall, who produced This American Wife with us. Like, we have a ton of stuff going on and we are really in the driver's seat of those projects, which I really like. There's one high profile project that we did receive a phone call from like an A-list celebrity, which was like sort of a crazy experience, but that's the only cold call really that we've received.
Okay.
But it's maybe the only one we need.
Hey,
So
that's
I
right.
can't
That only takes one, right?
exactly.
What
Yeah.
what can you tell me about the projects that are coming up? What are you working
Um, two of them are stage musicals, which is new for us too. We've never done. I mean, Ratatouille was sort of, but we didn't develop the music and lyrics. So one of them is with Ars Nova, which is where we developed Circle Jerk. It's a theater in Hell's Kitchen. That's a Fake Friends show. One of them is Patrick and I are writing the book to a new musical, very early days, but we're sort of circling Truman Capote's life and his his experiences in New York City.
There's
sort
some
of broadly.
There's some fun fodder there for sure.
Yeah, and he's obviously a very fascinating figure, especially for obviously literary history, but also queer history in the United States. And there could be something really interesting there, or it could be absolutely horrible. Like, we just don't know. So those are the two stage projects really that we're working on. And then we have two television projects that we're working on as well. That I can't say anything about.
Okay. Well, we'll stay tuned.
But they're exciting. They're really exciting. And, in TV, it's so different. It's like, who knows if any of this will ever, get made or wind up on one of these streaming platforms. But at least when the studios are like, we want to start working on this, they like actually pay you. So ultimately, by the time, whether they make it or not, it's like, well, I've already been paid a lot of money, and it's a very different industry than theater.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things I was getting at before when I mentioned your clear awareness of media. The work you've done, while theater in title very much could be and was designed for a smaller screen and to interact that way. So you all showed that the medium. And know you could stay within that sort of box.
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely do more of those sort of digital theater hybrid experiments in the future. And we will do a production of Circle Jerk sort of live in person too, in the coming months.
Good.
It's an interesting time. I don't know. Did you see Bo Burnham's show on Netflix called Inside?
I have not watched it.
I actually really liked it. I would recommend it. I don't really love him. I don't have any attachment to him. I don't hate him either, but and I watched it, and I thought it was really creative and sort of pushing the envelope, like pushing the culture and the form of sort of streaming content into a new place. And I really liked it.
Nice. How do you, so with that proliferation of screens and availabilities comes a much harder, in many ways makes finding an audience easier, but it also makes finding an audience a lot harder. You still sold tickets for something like This American Wife. Did you find success in building an audience that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think we started with Circle Jerk and we were like, there's going to be $5 tickets available. It'll be on a sliding scale, so you can pay more if you want, and there will be unlimited tickets. Like, that was very important to us. And what theater in New York has $5 tickets available? Like, sure. None. So those ticket sales were like sort of astronomical and sort of above and beyond. And also Jeremy was a producer with us, and he had a lot of his friends tweet out about the show. So we had Sarah Paulson tweeting and Roxanne Gay and these very big Twitter presences. Also, obviously, maybe before big tweeters, like immense talents, but but this is the world we live in. So they tweeted, and we the ticket sales were great. And then Ratatouille, again, $5 ticket was available for everything, which was amazing, and sold basically $2 million in basically fundraising money for the Actors Fund. And then This American Wife sold really, really well too, though with that production we were trying something out to see what would happen if we had a limited number of $5 tickets, and then the rest were $25 tickets, I believe. And it sold really well. it just was a different ratio, you know what I mean, of like number of tickets. But it, it's all sort of boring business stuff, but it's interesting to see how to build an audience. And I think all you need is like Twitter and some loud people.
and good content at the end of the day, right?
Yes, that actually is really important. I mean, not that, not to be like our shows were so amazing, because there are other shows that have done really, really well. But the show has to be good. It can't just be like people tweeting out a link and then the show's sort of like, what is this, Because we found on Circle Jerk, what was so exciting, like people would like record parts of it and put it on their story, or record part of it and like meme it even and put it on Twitter. And like it sort of became its own like social media trend. Obviously not like national trend at all, but like in like theater and certain circles, like
sure.
So that was very interesting and honestly very unexpected. We didn't anticipate any of that.
This is the future is now, right? This is the future of theater and future of entertainment. And you seem to be navigating it quite well. It's impressive.
As I said, it's and for all of us in Fake Friends, and also Rory Pelson, who's our director, like it just sort of, it is how we live. So sometimes, certain critical responses can be like, this is so much, or like, this is so mediated. And that's strange to us, because we're like, wait, but like, this is literally just like how we move through the world.
It's an okay boomer moment right there, right?
Well, you said it, not me.
I think that there's a culture class at work with those things. I don't know, but I imagine, especially in theater, where there is this view of an old guard, traditional view of what theater is, and you all are taking that and kind of blowing that up. Which is one of the things that's interesting to me about your background is the history, you respect the history, and studied it for a long time. And it's like anyone who's great at something knows the rules and then knows how to blow up those rules and do their own thing. And it seems like that's the background that you and the Fake Friends crew have.
That's a really good way of putting it. I'm going to put that on the website.
All right. You can have it. It's
Thank
yours.
You.
So thinking back of learning that history and getting to where you are now and blowing up the rule book, when you got from Jersey to Hamilton, anything you wish you had known?
I was thinking about this all day. Well, I wish I had known earlier, honestly, that I would not have the professional network that I needed to immediately break into theater. Because to be honest with you, the few years after graduating were pretty tough professionally, but that, trickles into your personal life, because it was like, I don't have anything to really grab onto. So I wish I had at least just known that was the case, like, I don't think I would have changed anything else really, but like knowing that it's okay. And that like, eventually if you work hard enough, you'll develop your network. And to me, the most valuable thing about going to Hamilton was my relationships with Carol and Nancy and Craig, like these teachers who really just changed everything. So I don't know. And also just know that it's going to be and no, you don't want to know how crazy it's going to be that you're there. Yeah.
What do you? I imagine you get a lot of students reaching out to you now. What do you tell them and how to follow in your footsteps? What advice do you give students that want to get into your work?
I always say, like, be aware of the sort of noise in the industry. Like, actually know what's going on professionally, like in terms of who are the producers, who are the artistic directors, know all of that, but then ultimately say fuck it. I think it's this delicate dance of like knowing who has like access to give you the power, like basically the power to give you access to the networks, but at the same time not catering to them, because I think, I don't know, and maybe that's why people don't contact me, as I told you earlier. I just don't find it's an honest place to work from creatively. And also read books. I mean, that's like, the people from Hamilton mostly know this, but I'm like, never stop, reading. A lot of theater people like to read, but a lot of them don't. And I'm like, let's read novels and nonfiction and keep your mind alive, because you never really know where your ideas are coming from. But if you don't put ideas in there, I mean, I'm on Instagram 4 hours a day, so I'm not like a saint. I'm not like some like monk who's like only reading all day, but you have to put both the high and the low into your head.
Sure. This is probably a hack example of what you're saying, but Lin-Manuel Miranda brings this giant biography of Alexander Hamilton on vacation with him, and look where that got him.
No, it's a great example. Yeah. I love him, and I know it's so nerdy to say, but I love everything that he's doing, and I am so inspired by his whole thing.
I mean, I agree. It's just like, can the guy fail once?
I know.
Every single thing he does. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
I know. And to think that he started writing in the Heights when he was a student at Wesleyan, it's just crazy. So wild too. Like, he's really, he's it.
Yeah.
I also would just say, like, okay, maybe this is something that I wish I had known, is really, like, as I've lived my life since then, I didn't even know, basically, after I graduated, how, I know privileged is sort of a cliched word now, or like sort of overly political word, but I really mean it, of course, privileged economically to go to a school like Hamilton, and racially, gender, like all of that 100%, like that's, to me, obvious. But I really mean, like, in terms of the exact place and the people who were teaching there and the people who were my friends and the sort of academic intellectual environment that was alive while I was there. I meet people who that's just like not even an experience they ever would have dreamed of having. You know what I mean? Like, of course, they've had their own really productive lives. I'm no better or worse than them. But to me, I really value, like, those experiences around the seminar table or whatever. And I didn't quite know until like my mid-20s, like, that it was a unique experience. I think I was a little sheltered. I mean, I was from a small town in New Jersey. Of course I was globe-trotting, but I was alone. And, it caught up to me later.
Do you think that influences your work now? Like, do you think that sort of that revelation and having that experience impacts you now?
100%. And that's why I think I have a theater company and I don't do things alone. I really value collaboration, of course, but also disagreement and argument, which I think, Hamilton was a very intense place, obviously, while I was there. And there were political disagreements that were quite charged and quite fiery. But I think there was always a commitment to maintaining the disagreement or maintaining the argument rather than squashing it in one way or another, at least in my experience there. And it's a practice. I'm still trying to value that. I think we're in a very, obviously, if you've seen Circle Jerk, like, we're in a very polarized place right now in terms of politics, but also in terms of like just like daily morality. Lots of
we can't get through a pandemic and without politicizing whether or not we should be safe in certain sensible ways. I mean, it's
so it's like, and now it's like, how do you, with certain family members or people in my life, how do I continue to value argument even if it's in the face of like an anti-science or, sort of what I might call like fanatical sort of presence. But I don't ever think the answer is really like just telling people to shut up or disengaging.
Right.
Which I think I learned really from my mentors at school.
With the and then I'm want to be respectful of time because we started late, so I don't want to keep you too late. But on this topic, when you do something like Circle Jerk, which not everyone will like such a thing, do you get negative feedback? Do you get blowback, or are you drawing an audience that would only be interested in that?
None really. I mean, there was critical negativity, specifically from the New York Times on both shows, which is a little bit like, whatever. Like, I hope you have fun. Yeah, it's like, okay, cool. And then, the Pulitzer thing happens and people are like, oh my God, like, Circle Jerk is so great. And it's like, you weren't saying that in October. But not really. The funniest blowback we got was we did this like interview with CBC, which is like the Canadian press outlet, and it was about white men and gay white men and all that. And the right, no, I think it was actually the left, on like certain like lefty Twitter people in Canada started like attacking us and on Twitter, being like, how dare you say that gay men are oppressors? Like, they are, we have lived through decades of oppression and blah, blah, But that was really it. I think like in this era,
I didn't know Canadians had it in them to attack people.
Me either. But then I guess you put anyone on Twitter and it's just like, what else are they going to do? Like, what else are you meant to do on that devil bird app?
The cesspool, yeah.
Yeah. But I think, I don't know, one of my questions moving forward is how to access more diverse audiences. And I include like politically diverse audiences too. Like, obviously the whole algorithm spiel, the whole like social media bubble spiel.
Yeah.
And I think because of the virality of all the pieces that we've done, it's been viral in a specific bubble.
Sure. Right.
So I'd be interested in what other people have to say. Honestly, I want people to fight me.
All right, that's Michael Breslin, class of 2013. It's interesting. I went into the conversation thinking we would get into this commentary on media and the explosion of TikTok and short attention span, and a lot of their work is fast and furious with jokes and visuals. And Michael just says, no, it's just the way we live. It's the way we grew up. The creative work is often a reflection of what's going on in society, and I think you're seeing that. And as I said in the beginning, it feels like you're talking to the future face of theater, and in many ways, this is what theater's going to look like. I look forward to seeing what's next with Michael and Fake Friends, because I think there's even bigger things coming. So my thanks to Michael for joining this week. You have been listening to Had I Known on WHCL-FM, Clinton, New York. HadIKnown.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on this show. And once again, Doc is going to play us out. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'll talk to you next week.
podcast show on your radio or take it to go.